When a community is thinking about enhancing their intergenerational engagement, there's a really, I think, a definite way of beginning that strategy, and that is to pull members of the community together and have an intergenerational visioning session, a dialogue about what it is that we want for the future for our community. Whether you're 16 or 60, there's certain things that you have in common that you know, that you find is mutual ground. They're things that you really care about. You care about having a safe and secure environment. You care about being able to be active, be valued, be engaged. So to have that dialogue so that the actual participants, the actual citizens of a community can identify what it is they think is most important is a great way to begin. And then from there, to start small, to realize it's important to start where you are and do what you can. So come up with something that's doable. And it may simply be a Grandparents' Day activity in September. It may be something for Earth Day. It may be something for an historic day in your community. But start with something that's doable and then let it build.
I think an important way to start is to look at your community and look at what are the important issues in your community. And to then put your intergenerational lens on and say, how could we approach this issue, this problem, by bringing the generations together to work on it. And so you're not going into the idea with what the solution is, you're going in with that lens and that problem or that issue. And then you bring those entities together, be it the generations, older and younger, people that serve those, senior agencies, youth agencies, schools, to come together and say, how could we bring the generations together to address this issue in our community? And I think that's a great starting point. And it also underscores the importance of intergenerational work, that we don't have a burden on either side. It's not problem kids, it's not problem seniors. It's bringing these generations together that often aren't viewed as a resource, to come together and find solutions in our community. And when you really start seeing some solutions coming forward, I think you see the true worth of bringing the generations together. But to start, it has to be kind of in a very purposeful way, because the way we live today is we're more age segregated. So you have to bring them together, present the issue, and have them start moving towards solution.
I'm delighted to be here. It's wonderful to have received Kathy's invitation to see old friends and to meet new folks. And I was thrilled when Kathy and I started talking about this, and I thought, well, maybe. And so I looked at the chief's schedule and saw there was a game that was close to the date. And I contacted Pam, and sure enough, she and her husband Doug were going to, well, I knew they'd be here, but they were going to still be here. So it's wonderful to have Pam here because she's going to be able to really talk to you about the work that they've done the last 15 years in San Diego County, which I think is probably just the jewel of intergenerational communities in the country. So I'm just delighted and honored that, Pam, you're here, delighted to be with you folks. But also, as Kathy alluded to, I always love coming back because I was born in Topeka. And my family always came back to Kansas. And when I was working for National 4-H in particular, I would get back here a lot. And I'd always drive over to Topeka to see my Grandpa Butts. And Grandpa Butts lived to be about 95 years old. And I remember visiting him one day after he had moved into an assisted living facility. And he was then, I think, about 92 years old. And I said, well, Grandpa, I can come back tomorrow morning before I leave town and we can have coffee. And he said, oh, I'm kind of busy tomorrow morning. And I said, well, what time would work? At 9? He said, well, maybe 10. I said, okay, I'll come by at 10. So the next day I went over and visited him. I'm thinking, okay, I wonder what the doctor had to say, or I wonder what he was getting checked up, all that. Well, it turns out he had exercise class, and it was only him and the girls, so he didn't want to miss it. So I think Grandpa, to me, is one of those stories that shows how we're living longer, we're living healthier, and we really need to work together to redefine what the opportunity, the possibilities, but also the responsibilities are as we add, now it's something like 7 years to life that we've added, and healthy years. So what do we do as communities to shift the conversation from burden to benefit? And that's a lot about what I'm going to talk about today. Today, what I want to touch on and what Pam and I are going to try to do are really three things. We want to talk about solidarity and why it's important that we keep the generations connected. We want to talk about specifics, what you can do on the ground, because we can all talk about the high level, but what happens when you actually get into a community. And then we hope that what we're going to do is spark some ideas. And if you can go away with one aha, I can do that, aha, I can take an action, then I think we'll feel like we've accomplished something today. So that's really what we're going to be focusing on. Now, I wanted to start by telling you just a little bit about Generations United. And Kathy, it's fun that you asked that question, because you know how we all get into our jargon? Like every time Kathy says Casey Communities for All Ages, I think of the Casey Family Programs or the Annie Casey Foundation, and then I have to go, no, it's Kansas City. So what we found is, and what our messaging people say is, you know, we can in the family talk about GU, but if you're outside, nobody else knows what GU is, or they think it's Georgetown University. So be sure to talk about Generations United. So thank you for asking that. So Generations United was founded back at a time when this was actually the cover of a journal. And you can see it's a young person, an older person. They're in battle fatigues. They each have a gun. And basically the message was, back in the 80s, take 10 paces, turn and shoot. Whoever's left gets our country's most valuable resources, gets our resources. We can't possibly support our bookend generations, our older adults and our children, and not bankrupt the country. So our founders, which were the leading aging children and youth organizations, came together and said, no, we can and should support those important generations. And so what one of our founders, Jack Osofsky, said is, we founded Generations United to argue for a caring society, to argue for a caring society that wasn't going to throw older people or younger people under the bus. And our mission continues to be to improve the lives of children, youth, and older adults through intergenerational collaboration on policies and programs for the enduring value of everybody. Or as Thomas Jefferson said, we really work to support the web of mutual obligation between the generations that's really essential for a civilized society. And when you think about it, it beats the alternative. It beats the alternative of a gated community. We advocate for an ungated community because this is what we could look like, where we're all behind gates. And I think that we've seen some tremendous examples of what happens when we do unleash that power. And I think one of the greatest collaborations I've seen lately, have anybody heard the Lady Gaga, Tony Bennett CD? Isn't it fabulous? I think it's great. She's 28, he's 88. So there's a 60-year age difference, and what they each bring to the equation is fantastic. And what Lady Gaga has said is, you know, I tell Tony every day that he saved my life, because he came into her life at a time in her career where she felt like she was being taken advantage of, and she didn't trust other people. And he'd been through all that, so he could coach her and guide her and be there as a friend and as a supporter. So it's worked out to be a great collaboration. They really are age advantaged. And what we talk about is, through that age advantage, is really protecting the social compact. And that social compact is all about how we, at different times in our lives, give and receive. We're strong, we may need a little bit of support. We start off as babies and we need a lot of care, and we can give back. But it's that social compact that keeps us connected and keeps us as a civil society. So why do we think it's more important today than ever before? Well, I always go back to one of my favorite doctors. Anybody here like Dr. Seuss? I love Dr. Seuss. And if one of the books that you've read happens to be, Oh, the Places You'll Go, then you remember the places you'll go. You remember how you'll go to all those exciting places, those wonderful places. You'll have the highs, you'll succeed, you're going to go far, far, far. But then you end up in that most dreaded place, that awful place, the waiting place. And you wait, and you wait, and you wait. And when you think about it, when we created adolescence at the turn of the last century, we turned it into a waiting place. You're too young to contribute, you're waiting to be. And now as we're creating this whole new time in older life, we're turning it into a waiting place. You're too old to contribute and you're waiting to die. And that's not true on either end of the book, of those bookend generations. We really shouldn't make them waiting places. We should make them places that have high expectations and high hopes. And it's more important now than ever. This is the cover of our latest report that was released last December, out of many, one, Uniting the Changing Faces of America. You're probably all very aware, and you can't have watched any of the recent elections without being very aware, that our population's changing. 22% of the population today that's over 65 is of color, 22%. Of the population under the age of 5, it's over 50%. So as we've segregated generations by policies, by facilities, by programs, we have this trajectory of these two populations that don't look alike and have never been exposed to each other because we've kept them isolated from each other. So why should older adults care about investing in children? Why should children care about investing in older adults if we're not letting them be connected and know that, hey, it's my neighbor, it's my friend? I disagree with Ron Brownstein, who in the National Journal said, we've turned on to the road of sustained competition between brown and gray. I don't believe that we have to say that we've turned onto that road of competition. I think, and we think at Generations United, that our age and race demographics are our greatest asset, our country's greatest asset. When you think about a country like Japan that has basically kept itself isolated, they have an aging population without a young population that's coming up. So you look at countries that don't have that incredible mix of a younger population there to support the older population and the older population there to support the younger population, and they really are in trouble. We talk about turning that competition, that notion of competition into cooperation, competition into collaboration, and competition into community, because we are age advantaged. There really is more that connects us than separates us. So let's talk a little bit about a little history. I'm going to talk a little bit, give you a little bit of the groundwork, the history of some of the intergenerational practices around the country. Pam is going to talk to you in depth about how they actually made it work in San Diego County. And then we're going to propose some ideas about things you might want to consider in your areas and your communities. And then we're going to mix it up and have a very interactive session. But first we're going to try to share a little bit of information with you. So how has intergenerational practices, how have they evolved over the course of several years? And I do need to tell you, one of the reasons I like to do PowerPoint is because we do an intergenerational photography contest. So most of the images that you're seeing were taken by younger or older photographers, capturing the connection between generations. And that's a really simple thing that you can do in a community, is do a little photography competition of what it's like in your community when generations come together. So at first, intergenerational practices back in the 1960s were really seen as kind of sweet and nice and optional, kind of an add-on, not really integrated into the core work. And then they became a little bit more serious, people understanding that the contributions of all ages and all abilities were needed by communities, so that contribution. And now they've evolved really to community-wide efforts, which is what you folks are talking about here. And I love this because this is actually a collage of what a group of older people said they wanted to see in a community. They wanted to have purpose and work, they wanted to do it with other generations, and they wanted to have fun. Sounds like most of us. But we really believe, where we've come to, is that we can unleash the power and be age advantaged when we realize that we have this incredible human capital asset that could potentially sit dormant. This is an 82-year-old leading a teenage exercise class. And I think she's probably got a little bit more energy than even the teenagers do. But what's happened oftentimes is that older adults, as they look towards retirement, they're thinking about maybe their financial situation, but not what it is they're going to do with their time. So I had a chance to meet with the Federal Reserve Board governors last year, and what I talked about was, as a country, we would never let a capital asset sit dormant. We would make sure that it was active, it was engaged, that we were working it. And so one of the examples I gave is, for example, we have 72 million baby boomers. It's said that older adults on average watch 47 hours of television a week, 47 hours. A volunteer hour is valued at $23 an hour, about $23 an hour. So if you took just 10% of that time that boomers are said to be watching television and instead engage that in a community, that 10% would equal almost $900 million. $900 million. When would we ever let that amount of money sit in a bank or on a shelf? We'd never do it. But I think one of my heroes actually got it very well, and that's Mr. Rogers, when he said, whether we're a preschooler or a young teen, a graduating college senior or a retired person, we human beings all want to know that our being alive somehow makes a difference in the lives of others. We all need purpose. So with intergenerational programs, the way that they have evolved is oftentimes thought of as directional. There are younger people serving older people. There's older people serving younger people. There's younger and older serving together. And there's younger and older under one roof. And I'll talk a little bit about those facilities. But just a couple quick examples. This is young serving old. And one of the ways that younger people are really engaged is through technology. And this was a session that we did at Grantmakers in Aging here, actually. And we had a group of young people who lead technology programs teaching older people how to use an app called Red Stamp, which if you haven't used it is great because it's an app where you can take a picture and turn it into a postcard and email it to somebody. So they did all these selfies, and you may recognize this woman here. There's Kathy. Kathy was in the session. But these young people have taught hours and hours of technology, and one of them brought his 92-year-old student with him to talk about what it was like. And he's actually been teaching his 16-year-old teacher some new technology that he didn't know about. So it's that exchange again. But young serving old is oftentimes seen in the technology area. Old serving young, there are many, many examples of it. This is one from Chinook, Kansas. It's called a school greeter program. Now, I didn't realize till they sent us pictures that oftentimes the older adults dress up in costumes when they greet the students, but I guess they do. But what happens, it's a really simple program because every Monday morning at the schools in Chinook, older adults volunteer and they're there to greet the children as they come into school. They say, welcome, glad you're here, thanks for coming, it's going to be a beautiful day. And what they realize is oftentimes for those children, it's the first words of encouragement they've gotten all day. And then after they greet the students, they go and they have coffee together in the cafeteria, and then they go on about their lives. So very simple, very easy intervention where the older adults feel like they're contributing, and they are. And it's really helping the younger people in their communities. And then there's old and young serving together. This is a picture of Kari, who was 17 at the time, and his 90-year-old mentor. And together they work in Washington, D.C., or they did work in Washington, D.C., to preserve the history of the first freed slave graveyard in Washington, D.C. And when his mentor and Kari connected, his mentor was so pleased because that meant that his work was going to continue. And he did pass away this last fall, and Kari is continuing that work. But it's young and old capturing and helping a community together. And then there's under one roof. This is one of my favorite examples in Swampscott, Massachusetts. Swampscott, Massachusetts, they had a 100-year-old senior center, a 100-year-old high school. Now, you've probably heard situations like that. Do we replace the senior center? Do we replace the high school? What do we do? And what happens is people get in their trenches and they battle it out. But Swampscott took another approach. They said, what if we gather and pool our resources? And they did. And so they built an absolutely beautiful new high school and senior center that's a combined facility. It is a green building. It's larger than it ever could have been had they built two separate facilities. And what happens now is, the day I was visiting them, is I went into the gym and there was a group of older people who were getting ready to practice for a tap dance show they were doing, and then there were a bunch of students who were getting ready for basketball, and they were just sitting side by side on the benches, tying their shoes, lacing up their shoes. How are you today? Good. No. And then they'd go off and do what they were doing, but they just naturally integrated. So when the school could no longer afford to keep the library open 5 days a week, the older adults came forward and said, train us, we can do it. So 2 days a week, the library is now staffed by the older adults who keep it open. Now, would they have driven across town? Would they have thought these are our students, this is our school, if they weren't already there? No. So it's a great example of how to naturally reintegrate people. You have a great example here of an intergenerational shared site at Pemberton for Grand Families. It's one of the few and first apartment buildings for grandparents raising grandchildren. So it's serving multiple populations. And then this one, Pam can tell you a little bit more about. This is in San Diego, and this is Seniors on Broadway. This is a senior apartment building that was built on the grounds of an elementary school, I believe it was. And so now they're integrating the programmatic aspects. But Pam will be able to tell you more about that, and I know that she worked really hard as a member of the school board there to make sure that this happened. And then there's Easter Seals, which in Montgomery County has an intergenerational facility. And that's adult daycare, child care, and what they specialize in, those are close to Walter Reed Hospital, so where they have a Wounded Warrior program. So they specialize in a Little Warrior program where the children of wounded warriors go for child care while their parents are in therapy and rehab. And that extra support of the older adults is what the recovering warriors say really helps their family, is to have that connection with another older adult. Part of what we're talking about today, I think, is thinking about it in terms of economies of scope. It's taking a single intervention and realizing that it impacts multiple generations, multiple return on investments versus individual facilities or programs. Now, we all know that everybody doesn't want to be together all the time, and that's not what we're suggesting. What we're saying is that in communities, these approaches save dollars while making sense. And there was a study done by Virginia Tech that showed that intergenerational facilities save money in rent, staff time, and administrative overhead because they can share a copy machine, they can share a receptionist, they can share. So they actually save dollars while making sense, which I think is a very important element of it. And one program in South Dakota, what they demonstrated is a staff satisfaction. In their facility, which normally would have about an 80% turnover, they had an 80% retention rate because their staff reported being satisfied and excited about being able to work with multiple generations in multiple settings. So what it requires, though, is that you use an intergenerational lens. And I know Pam and I in particular, I can't look at anything without thinking about what's the role of older adults? How do we engage young people? What do young adults have to say about this? How can we approach this? How can we tackle this by using those huge resources? So at Generations United, we started thinking about how do we support some of the work that's starting to develop. So one of the things that we did was start our Best Intergenerational Community Awards. And there's the applications on our website, it has the guidelines, and what we found is that a lot of communities go to apply to be a best intergenerational community, and they find out that we've got these 4 out of 5 elements, and then they strengthen the other and apply, and it works out great. We honor the winners on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C., and it's a wonderful, wonderful way to acknowledge the strong communities around the country that are realizing that they can accomplish much more, not through a single program, but a community-wide effort. And I would suggest that one of the things you might want to consider is to look at that and think about in the next year or two, or now, can your community apply and get a designation as one of the best intergenerational communities in the country? They're all sizes and they're all over. So I wanted to share one little video with you about one of the winners from a year ago.
Montgomery County is a great place to live for all ages. That's what representatives from MetLife and Generations United say. And Montgomery County was recognized for that designation at an award ceremony in Washington, D.C.
Honoring the recipients of the 2013 Generations United MetLife Foundation America's Best Intergenerational Communities Award.
Yeah, it recognizes decades of work in the county to build a great quality of life for young people and seniors. There's a lot of nonprofits that the county supports that directly bring seniors into classrooms to do tutoring and language skills. In our planning, we try to prioritize walkable development so that seniors and young people can live independent lifestyles. There's so many ways in which we want Montgomery County to be a community for a lifetime, and that's what this award is all about.
Montgomery was one of 4 communities selected for the award. Chosen for recognizing the value of promoting strong bonds between generations, the county has been a trailblazer in advocating for seniors and intergenerational programs. 30 years ago, an intergenerational committee was formed to plan for a system where young and old could live together.
We started a long time ago. In fact, I guess we're the 2nd oldest center in the country. And it's very nice to be recognized nationally. But the real satisfaction comes from the dailiness of seeing young people benefit from contact with older people and the reverse. And it's just a joy to see the projects that we do.
Thanks for busting me out as a granddad. Appreciate that.
Author and journalist Juan Williams presented the awards. And Congressman Chris Van Hollen was among the representatives for the county. He said Montgomery has excelled in providing intergenerational programs and practices.
I'm really pleased that Montgomery County, the county that I have the great privilege of representing, has really been so far ahead of the game. Montgomery County has been one of the pioneers behind the idea of what we call intergenerational support, cooperation, the idea that we have these two great resources. We've got our young kids who are our future, but we also have lots of experienced people who are getting older and have a whole lot to contribute to our community and to our kids.
We have a program where we take young people into senior facilities. It's bringing the community into the senior facility, and the smiles on the faces of people when they see, you know, elementary school kids come and have activities together is joyous.
Montgomery County in Maryland is a fairly affluent county, and they've been at this for 30 years. So you can start to see really the benefits, the fact that it does take time, it takes leadership, it takes commitment from people like you to really make it happen. But it doesn't have to be, and it isn't, just a community like Montgomery County. This is a picture of the winner from Itta, Mississippi. And Itta is about 1,200 people and has a very high level of poverty. But what they found in Itta is by pooling the resources, engaging people of all ages, they could set goals to be a healthy community. They could actually extend resources further. And so we have a number of examples of communities of all sizes and all abilities that can take this work and really make a difference. And one of my favorite examples is in Georgetown, Texas. And there I like to say they went from Sun City to Soul City. Georgetown, Texas realized that about a third of its population was a growing Sun City. And so what they did was really a concerted effort to reach out and engage those Sun City residents, engage the schools, engage the community. And they bus the seniors for games. The students go into the community and help with gardening. They help with tasks. They get involved in each other's lives. They do intergenerational spelling bees. Well, Georgetown, Texas, a couple of years ago, as a result, was the only community in that part of Texas that voted in favor of a school bond levy. Because again, the seniors felt like it was their school, their kids, they wanted to support them. So it's that engagement so that people feel like they're not in a fortress, that they're not shut off from other ages, that makes a difference. And this was, again, one of the last award programs, and I love this because this is Robert Simon, who is I think in the development area is very, very well known. He was just turning 100 when he came out to speak at the event. And then this was our youngest speaker, who was 17, from another community. And what Robert Simon did was when his family sold Carnegie Hall in New York, he invested that money and built a community that's called Reston, Virginia. And he built it intentionally over 50 years ago to be intergenerational. So he told a great story that I do have to share with you. He said, as he was speaking, that there's a statue of him in the town square. And he was sitting in the town square one day, and this group of school children came along, and their teacher was standing there explaining to them who this was and this statue was. And then the children came, and they saw him, and this little boy looked at him and said, "How did you get out of there?" It's those fresh eyes that make such a difference. But one of my favorite examples is San Diego and their whole effort with Live Well San Diego. They have incredible depth of programming. They've been committed in doing this work for quite some time. And so we're really fortunate that Pam is here today to talk to you about how that developed, how that evolved, and then to help plant some seeds about some of the things that you may want to consider.
Good morning. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here today. And I did want to wear my favorite team's shirt today. So it's really a thrill. I've gotten to know Kansas City pretty well. My husband and I go to every one of Alex's games, so we spend a fair amount of time. Been so impressed with this area and how many innovative things are going on and happening. And in fact, Alex has 2 little boys, and we took them yesterday down to Union Station and saw a show and the model trains. Talk about an intergenerational program, is that model train program that's, although I'm not sure who are the kids there, the old folks or the kids. So we live in San Diego, and I work for San Diego County, and I was a deputy director there in our Health and Human Services. In California, the state's so big, the county administers all of the social services and health programs. And in our county, about 16, 17 years ago, we decided to merge our social service programs with our health department to try to have a better integrated system of services to serve our population. And you know, most of that money all comes very categorical on what it's going to be spent, yet how do you help it make sense when it really reaches the community in a more integrated way? And what they also did when they formed that, San Diego County is a big county. Land-wise, we're about the size of Connecticut. We have about 3.2 million people there, 22 cities. We range from the big city of San Diego, which is about 1.5 million, to some very small cities and even very rural areas in our backcountry. We're kind of have our own natural boundaries with the ocean and the border and the desert, and to the north we have Camp Pendleton, which is a huge marine base, and that really protects us from LA. So we have our own kind of nature there. When we created our Health and Human Services, because geographically we're such a big county, they decided to regionalize, take our programs and create 6 regions, geographic regions. We had a director of the agency and a deputy director that would run those regions. And that's everything from child protective to eligibility to programs, public health clinics, you know, a lot of the programs. But what they didn't do, and I wasn't with the county when this first started, they took all the programs that served older adults and they didn't regionalize those programs. And they moved them under one umbrella, the umbrella of the Area Agency on Aging. And it's 30-some programs, and put that together to create, we named it Aging and Independent Services, and that's actually when I came on board. Before that, I'd worked for the Social Security Administration. Came on board then to run that agency, and the reason they had it distinct was just the very issue you've talked about. How do we prepare for this growing older adult population, and what should our communities look like? So at the point we came on board, we were a new org chart. We were trying to, our own 30 programs that served older adults were all categorical programs. They had been in different buildings, you know. They weren't very integrated. We had different programs that served the same senior. You know, I've spent my whole life working in government, and I'm always amazed when people worry about a government conspiracy, because that would imply one part of government's talking to another part of government and really making something happen. You know, I love government. I'm very proud that I've spent my life in government, but communication's hard. And how do you make sense of it? And again, the fact things get so categorical is something we have to work again. You know, how do we make sense of that? So we've worked long and hard. And one of the first things we did is we had aging summits. So after we were a new agency, we pulled our community together and brought in, and we took 3 or 4 topics to try to go in depth and say, what should we be looking at here? We looked at things like transportation, long-term care integration, our call center. Even for us internally in the county, we had 32 programs. We had 32 different phone numbers. I mean, where do you even start? So what we heard from the community was, you got to merge that, you got to make, we don't know what we don't know, how do you turn? So we early on started looking at making sure we got our own programs better integrated and working, but then how do we work in the community? But one of our themes, and something that I really, really believe, is what a wonderful opportunity we have. You know, it is not the bad news that we're all living longer. You wouldn't know it often by watching the news in terms of, is Social Security going to go broke? Is Medicare going to go broke? Where are we headed with all of that? Rather than, wait a minute, let's step back and think. You know, the average life expectancy 100 years ago was about 47. In this country, and it had been slowly creeping up over the centuries, a few days at a time. And average life expectancy now is, in this country, 78 years. I mean, what greater gift could the 20th century have given us of the many things we got in transportation, communication, medicine, all those areas, that we got an additional 30 years of life for most Americans. You know, we always had a few people live into old age. But now, with all the things that happened, you know, in the 20th, immunizations and antibiotics and so many things, we've kind of figured out how to get everybody into old age. We just don't know what to do with them now. We've got them all there. And I'm there. So what's exciting about it, it's so exciting to see this group and elected officials and policymakers and key administrators, because you're really writing the book about what a community should look like with this whole new demographics. And as Donna said, that demographic is going to shift even more. And for a lot of years before, we didn't see that much change. But what a wonderful opportunity to really create that, write that book. It's a clean slate. Communities are trying to figure that out. And as we well know, as we look around the country, communities are doing very different jobs at that. Some are doing much better, some not. So what do we want our community to look like? And at the same time, we've got this huge demographic shift of older adults growing. So never before in the history of the world have we had this many people live this long, that are this healthy and have this much resource and have this much to offer, ever. At the same time, when you look at our population, we also, if you look at our working population, we're the most productive nation on earth. We squeeze about 13 months of work into 12, right? The hours that are there. What you hear on the news is how Americans don't take vacation, work 3 and 4 jobs, all that goes on. We have more single parents than ever before. We have more mobility than ever before, so if you do have extended family that could help you, they may live in different cities, different states across the country. So what that also creates is if you look at the under 18 population or under 20 population, you've got more kids that don't live with near extended family, that maybe have one parent there, that just very frankly have less caring adults in their lives than what we've had historically. We've always lived kind of as clans and villages and that population, and now all of a sudden, all of this has shifted. So now you've got this middle population working so hard, they're so tired. I look at some of my grown kids and have 4 kids and 2 in DC, and they are tired, they're running, they're all working and kids and going and exhausted and and we're actually there, to help and support. But you've got a lot of kids that need more caring adults in their lives that are checking in with those kids and helping them grow into being successful adults. Well, we often look at resources. Is it money? What do we need? Programs? Well, wait a minute. A community that has a large older adult population, that's a resource. That's a gold mine if you ask me. But how do you connect it? It used to happen a little more naturally, I think, in villages, in small towns. I'm from a small town, in places. But again, as Donna was talking about, we've become very age segregated. And again, because of the mobility and the places where we are, and we have senior centers and teen centers, we have daycare centers. I mean, you can take kids that go to school and interact, and they may not have any interaction with an older adult in their lives. So this is about stepping back and thinking about that, about what's really going to what's the future of our community, and what's going to make it rich, and how can we be more purposeful in bringing those generations together. Because it isn't, the way that we live now has kind of evolved it to not happen. So what we did in our Aging Summit about in the year 2000, one of the topics we added on at the very last minute of our 4 topics was intergenerational. And we did some research, what's going on in that area, not a lot. We're the experts. We found Donna at Generations United. We found Temple University, Nancy Henkin with Community for All Ages, a few people. And we asked them to come out and speak and be part and get our community to think about it. Here's what was interesting. So we have a general session and then we do breakout. You go breakout by topic. And again, remember, this was kind of the last topic. What does intergenerational mean? We put it in our smallest breakout room. We thought, well, we'll figure something out. Well, we should have put it in our biggest breakout room, because somehow it struck a chord from the get-go about what does that mean and what should we be doing about that. And maybe it's just the essence or feel of when you really start thinking about intergenerational, your own grandparents, your own family, your neighborhood, what it means in a neighborhood and a community, that it started to make sense. And that's really where we started our journey on intergenerational programs. And we have worked then now for about almost 15 years on that. But we've made great strides, and to the point we're very, very proud of what we've done. I want to tell you what I thought were some key things, and then it's about some of our specific programs. One of the things, I think people don't argue against intergenerational. I mean, who really doesn't like the notion of this, that you're going to come together, and it's mutually beneficial for both, and it's there. The biggest enemy we found is, biggest barrier, biggest problem. People think it's cute, it's nice. It's the older adult reading to a child, it's a child, visiting a nursing home, which are the programs. What we feel is it isn't that, it's critical. And that's the message we got from Generations United. we've got to turn the ship around of being so age segregated, so divided in our communities, and how do we bring them together? So one of the things we decided as we started going down this journey is we needed to look at some serious community issues and put an intergenerational lens on those programs and say, older adults are not the problem, it's not the burden, it's not the bad news. They can be part of helping us solve these kind of community problems. And we felt we really wanted to start with that lens of both intergenerational but older adults being part of the solution, not part of the problem. So one of the first things we did was start looking at having older adults work with kids in our foster care system or that in very troubled families. And in San Diego County, we have a residential high school for foster kids. Kids that are in the foster care system, if you're in the foster care system in your teens, it's very unlikely you're going to be adopted. They probably have been bouncing around the system. All the numbers on statistics on teenage foster kids are really grim. Nationally, 50% of them don't graduate from high school. The numbers of they end up homeless, they end up in prison. At one point there was a survey in California that 75% of people in prison had been in the foster care system. You know, we really fail. We're failing as a nation, a lot of those kids, and what are we doing to help them move on? So one of the things we did there is they had bought an old Seventh-day Adventist boarding school in San Diego that was out. It had an orchard and it was a bigger area. And they decided they were going to make a residential school for these kids that wanted to go there. They're not mandatory, but really give it a full court press to try to help them get through school and on to some kind of vocation, college, something. And the county and our board of supervisors, so that's our elected officials for the whole county, really looked at this and wanted to make a difference and partnered with the County Office of Education. We partnered with a nonprofit to kind of run it and move forward. And after it was up and running a couple of years, we started on intergenerational programs. And if there's a message I would leave with you, it's put that lens on no matter what you're looking at. So we put that lens on with these kids, teenage foster kids, not the most cute, cuddly group of our population. Teenagers in general, you know, you've had them, seen them, known them, me too. But then foster kids have been through a lot, and they're often difficult to deal with. They've got their own issues. They've been dealt with trauma. There were houses on that campus because it had been a big orchard and development. And we said, how about if we move some older adults into some of those houses and see if they couldn't be part of what we're trying to do with these kids. So we set 10 houses aside. We went out and looked for volunteers to come in. We offered reduced rent for them to come. And this is up, if you've ever been to San Diego, it's up by the Wild Animal Park. So it's about 30 miles up out of the city of San Diego, a little bit remote, beautiful kind of hilly country. But 10 houses, seniors get a reduced rent for moving in. In exchange for that reduced rent, they volunteer on that campus, so it's where they all live. And here's their job description. Care about those kids. Care about those kids. Understanding that we're trying to help these kids, you know, get through school and go on. Well, I will just tell you very briefly, and it's one of the programs, I'll show you a picture, it was magic from the very beginning. Because in some ways, we kind of had two throwaway groups here. Teenage foster kids and often older adults. That, you know, when we say, you know, when you're this busy, the sandwich generation, you're taking care of everything, you know, go off and relax to mom or grandma or whoever, and mainly we just mean go off because we don't have time to deal with it. So when you brought them together, it has been a tremendously successful program. They just started doing the things that caring adults do in kids' lives. They have an 8-man football team at that school. And guess who's on the sideline at the games, watching the games? They do a prom there. Guess who's helping the girls get their dresses ready? Guess who's baking cakes for birthdays? Guess who's just doing all those things? And as they were there when our first kids graduated and went off to college at Christmas break, guess where those kids went? They didn't have home to go to. They went back and stayed with the seniors in those homes. And that notion, and I can't tell you the additional meaning that brought to those older adults' lives. So that kind of notion, and what helped us, and I think this is an important point, and it's very important, I think, with policymakers and elected officials. When our policymakers saw that, you get it. It isn't just cute, it's critical. We've got to do better by foster kids, and here was one important element to help us get there. And you could see, and here's the other thing I think that's very appealing to everybody, and certainly our elected officials, everybody wins with it. You're using whatever dollar you've got there, and it really was benefiting everybody there, and you start seeing it. There's actually been several shows done on our program there because it really shows some of our most critical problems and about how successful those kids are and how the seniors that are in that situation are thriving. I got a letter, two of the seniors that moved in there. One was a 60-year-old woman and her mother, who was in her 80s. And after she'd been there about 6 years, she wrote me a letter and said, I never thought I could have this much meaning in my life again. She loves those kids. And it just enhanced, and of course, you know, you do better then. Your health does better in where you are. So we went down that road of really trying to look at critical issues, look at problems. We were able to get a few funders to do some jumpstart grants, because sometimes I feel like our age segregation were like parallel lines in a community and they don't cross. And we put out some money, $10,000 startup grants to try to get those parallel lines to cross. In El Cajon, we had a senior center in the park and a Boys and Girls Club here, and the only interaction they had was the kids used to throw rocks at the seniors' cars when they left. So you can imagine how that relationship was. They got a startup grant, and they went out and bought a bunch of softball equipment and some sports stuff, and they decided to do some intergenerational softball teams between seniors and the kids. And again, Donna's slide about we've got more in common than we have difference. As soon as that started happening, things started melting away in the problem. There they were, they hadn't interacted, it started going. Pretty soon the kids were inviting the seniors in to play pool in the Boys and Girls Club. Then they were inviting them in to go to the computer room, and they started teaching them technology and computers. Then the seniors were doing things for the holidays and things for those kids. So that's one where a little bit of money brought them together, but the program now has gone on and is thriving. And we did lots of those little kind of startup things. The other thing, as we're looking at, if you're looking at older adults and as a resource, it isn't just about going and finding money that comes from the aging community. Because again, most of our money that came in was very targeted and categorical. You can't use it broadly. But we reached in and got money out of our child welfare system, our child protective, to help stipend our seniors to work with foster kids. You know, we started reaching into schools and look at what could we do at schools. The picture Donna showed you, I served on a school board. When you really start thinking about it and have this lens, I went back and started talking again from a policy perspective, and we were building a new charter school in a part of our community that was lower income. Well, also what is there were some HUD housing to do a senior apartment complex. Normally that would have been down the street or somewhere. Well, the school district reached out to the nonprofit and said, we'll donate the land for you to put it on there if you build it here, and then we generate intergenerational communities. So look at that stream of monies out there in your community. HUD money for low-income housing, we've got school money. Transportation's always a problem if you're going to do intergenerational. Well, how about if we eliminate that because they're right there? And so that program has really evolved. And so we're always looking for ways. The Intergenerational Games is another program about where we're going. One of the things we did very early on also, we decided, is we created a position in the county that was an intergenerational coordinator. So from our Aging Summit, as we started looking at these programs, somebody's got to work on those things. How do we go out and work with our community, and what do we do? And so our county stepped up and used some discretionary funds, which, you know, that's like gold, discretionary money. And we hired an intergenerational coordinator to go out and really start kind of making this happen in our community. And we have evolved that to where it is about educating people, bringing groups together that were seniors groups and youth groups. They often don't come together. What could we do, you know, to bring them together? And we viewed it as how do we help them kind of think about it and create something and give birth, I guess, get it up and running and being their own intergenerational program. My husband was a high school principal in a little city called La Mesa in our community, and it has a high percent of older adults. It's about 25 to 30% older adults, which I view as a gold mine then. You're there. And since I'm always talking about intergenerational and loving it, I talked to him and said, why don't you get something going at the high school? You know, and finally, you know, he just didn't have time. He's too busy, you know, we got other things. But he said, all right, we'll have a meeting. So we brought our team, I went to it, our intergenerational coordinator, and we invited the senior center that was about a half a mile away is all, to come to the meeting saying, what could we get going? We didn't have any money, we didn't have anything, how could we get things going? And There were a few teachers there. Everybody was kind of there because we twisted arms to get them there, but they got thinking about it. And the senior center director said, well, you know, we have Bill, who comes to our senior center every day. He's a World War II veteran. He's twice widowed. He's alone. He no longer drives. He loves to play chess, and he can never find enough people to play chess. Do you think there's anybody here that maybe we could get him here or do something with that? They then thought they had a program for 9th graders that they do extra tutorial to make sure 9th graders aren't falling behind in school. And so during the school day, they have this tutorial program. And what they said is, well, how about if we offer for kids in the tutorial during the day, if you get everything done, you can get out early, so it's a bonus, and maybe go play chess with Bill. So the demographics of this is Bill is this old white guy. And the demographics of Helix was very, very, it's like Donna showed, very, very diverse kids. So then you're thinking, okay, you're bringing these ages together, you're bringing a very different, you know, background and everything. He's there, though. We announced it to the kids to see who wanted to maybe play chess with Bill. The first day, 50 kids hustled to get their homework done, to finish up, to go play chess with Bill. 50 kids in that morning. Well, let me tell you, it just started a whole program. They had an old portable back behind the school. Bill went down there every morning and spent the mornings of different, you know, he'd get there at 7. He's an old Navy guy. He liked reheated coffee. So they had to, you know, heat him up a cup of coffee, and they popped him a bag of popcorn in the morning, and he set up this, and he brought in these chess sets, and he'd get 12 games going at once. He taught those kids chess etiquette. He taught them the importance of that kind of critical thinking. Here's what's real important. He got to know their names. It's somebody else checking in with those kids about how things are going, and equally important, how's Bill? One day after this had been going on for a couple of years, Bill, again, had 10 kids. They lived elsewhere. He was really lonely. He didn't come in one day, and the kids went to the instructor and said, where's Bill? And she said, well, you know, it's a volunteer program. He doesn't have to come in every day. And they said, you know, he would never not come in. We need to check on him. They called the senior center, got his number, called him, and Bill was sick. He was at home, had the flu, was under the weather. And the teacher then is talking to him and said, well, Bill, everybody's worried about you here. Pass the phone around to the kids. Bill, when are you coming back? Bill, I've been thinking about that move, and I'm going to get you, you know, on. What I will tell you is Bill's last 4 years of his life, he spent going down to that high school playing chess with kids. And when he died, it brought such enrichment to his later years of life, and he touched so many kids, and the chess program is going strong, that the senior center raised money and bought extra chess sets for the high school, and we got the most beautiful letter from his son that talked about, that's all Bill talked about, were his students and how they were doing, not only in chess, but in life. And I think when you see that, it can be anything as big as building a whole senior housing complex on an elementary school and making it happen, or it's about simply crossing a line and starting some programs. So Helix actually started all kinds of intergenerational programs. We had seniors coming in, quilting, nutrition programs, chess programs, all kinds of things that came. And we targeted kids that we thought were the most at risk, that needed that extra caring person in their life to come together. And in fact, Helix ended up using their own money. They were a charter high school, some of their own money, to hire their own part-time intergenerational coordinator to keep all of these programs going. So it is that example of really giving birth and moving forward. I want to just show you this. Where we are today in San Diego County, we have 5 intergenerational coordinators in the county. I'm actually not sure there's a public entity anywhere that even has one, that's all you do. And ours has been it's been so powerful. People have seen the benefits of all of this, to where we now have 5 that are funded. So each of our regional areas has an intergenerational coordinator. We have and Aging and Independent Services and our Child Protective Services. Because a lot of kids in that system, from the time they come in, we need more caring adults that are in there and working through that. So how do we bring them together? And people will say, okay, I'd like to have seniors, but where do I find them? How do we get there? Well, that's why if you take your senior organizations that are maybe working, youth organizations come together, brainstorm. And it's not for everybody to go live with teenage foster kids, but it is for some. And to have those options out there and see. We have programs with our Quality Preschool Initiative. We have a special tax in California, a tobacco tax that funds, it's called First 5 Initiative, and it funds preschool and programs. We took that, and those were funding daycare centers around the county, put that lens on. We gave them extra money to bring some seniors in, and we, whenever possible, we try to use a stipend, because there is a cost of volunteering, you know, getting there, doing. So we try to offer maybe $200 a month or something, gas cards or something for seniors to come and be there. They attached to these programs that we ran, and like one of those was a program for kids with domestic violence and transitional housing. And so these are families going through tremendous trauma, trying to get their lives in order. And to bring, and the group of seniors that we had in this particular one, we had 10 seniors. They were all former nurse practitioners, social workers, or teachers. Professional people that were able to come in and not only work with the kids, they started encouraging the family. When mom would come to get the child, and she was still getting over her black eye from that, these older adults would give the tough love of, you can't put your child in that situation. There is a way out here, and we will help you get out of this. So while their job was there to work with kids, they saw the bigger picture, and they brought that in. So it really evolved, and the programs that are going. So let me tell you a little bit too. So then we had to get a little more formal about, well, what is it our intergenerational coordinators do then? What's their job description? How do we measure success? You know, what's happening with that? So I just want to show you a little bit in my closing here about some of these programs and how we're measuring that. So we have to do, because the lead of the program comes out of the Aging and Independent Services, which is the Area Agency on Aging. So for that, because you get federal money, you develop an area plan, a strategic plan. So we actually built this into our strategic plan that goes to both the state and the federal government. About one of the things, so we looked at what are actual programs we're going to run and what are we going to do in the community. So one of the things that we do is the intergenerational games. We have an Olympic training center there, but we run these games all over the county. We run them at middle schools, we run them at parks, we do all kinds of things where you bring older adults and kids together. And it's about forming relationships, and it's about becoming healthier, more physically active, nutritious food. When you really look at, you know, the work I see, when I was looking at the work that you're doing for Community for All Ages, you know, a lot of it's about walkable communities, how do you get people involved, how do you get them out there? And of course, the more you can form these relationships, the more you get people out and together, neighborhoods become safer too. You've got more people out and interacting and getting to know each other. And this program has been a big success, and we've run it now for several years and have it going all over. So one, our coordinator actually coordinates some of those programs. Secondly, our intergenerational coordinators will collaborate with local community-based organizations, government entities, in order to facilitate implementation of programs. And so how do we go out and get those programs going in the community? How do we get Helix High School going? How do we get the Chula Vista Elementary School District that did the senior housing? How do we get child welfare, some of those? So it's about, again, taking that lens on, going out in the community, and we measure it by making sure we're working with local community groups to get at least 2 programs going a year that we think can go and move forward and be sustained. We've done Jumpstart grants. Sometimes we'll get some funding. Sometimes we have money, sometimes we don't. But Jumpstart grants, I will tell you, if there's any way, either from government funding or through a foundation or something, that can put some money out to just kind of get people to thinking and maybe get some equipment or do some things along those lines, it can help. But the third, it's evolved so much, goal of our intergenerational coordinator now is we have developed intergenerational coalitions throughout our county. So again, I told you regionally we're there. So we have a north, south, east, and west that's really evolved, that we bring together our community leaders, our city leaders, our nonprofits, our schools, and really look at what are we doing for intergenerational programming. And how do we share best ideas? How do we share best practices? So for our coordinators, it's running our own programs, it's working with the agencies in the community, but then it's also actually bringing a coalition together and looking at how do we really move forward. So we've gotten very specific. Our 5 and Fit program is one that we launched too out of Temple University. Our Live Well that Donna talked about is an initiative we have about, it's all built around 3, 4, 50, those numbers. That there's 3 behaviors that are leading to 4 diseases that's creating over 50% of the deaths in this country. It's the biggest public health issue in the United States right now, and frankly, it's based on tobacco use, inactivity, and improper diet, obesity. So our biggest public health problems 100 years ago were maybe microorganisms or influenza or things, infections. Today, it's not something we can't see, it's what we're doing to ourselves. We're not eating healthy, we're not staying active. Childhood obesity, 30 to 40% of our kids in this country. For the first time ever, they're projecting that kids won't live as long as their parents. So that's a ship we've got to turn around. So we're saying, well, older adults can be part of that. Older adults need to stay healthy too and stay fit. So we've launched a big 10-year initiative to look at those areas, because it leads to heart disease, cancer, lung, and diabetes. Over 50% of the deaths in this country nationally. And you look at San Diego, our beautiful climate, aren't we outside exercising? Our percent was 56%. So we're not any better. So we're really trying to get in and look at how do we have walkable communities? How do we get, what's happening with our transit system that we're really getting people out and about? But one of the core values we're putting on that is taking an intergenerational approach. So this is a program that's been developed and measured. We love community gardens, intergenerational community gardens. So we have a lot of community gardens going at school. One of our community colleges teaches child development there. And so we put a little startup money to help them put in a community garden. We run this 5 and Fit program. We get senior volunteers to come in. The kids are there because of the community development. And we do this, how to eat healthy, to learn about things, and develop this community garden. And it's all very neighborhood based. Intergenerational programs need to be very locally focused, so you're not seniors aren't going to drive from one end of our county to another to do, but they are very invested in their community. We have some wonderful community gardens. We have one at a middle school that's right behind a middle school in San Marcos. It's one of our cities. And it was a community garden there, but we added an intergenerational piece to it. And we brought kids that are in their special ed program out to work with the seniors and develop. And that program's been another magical one. And some of the kids came out and were in wheelchairs, so the older adults said, well, we've got to build some raised beds then. We've got to have this to help them get there. So, these have been very successful with it. Workforce Academy for Youth, we look at, we started this program, and this one is transitioning foster kids. So again, the bad numbers on if foster kids leave the system at 18, they don't make it, what happens to them? So the county launched this program, and we look at kids as they're transitioning out of the foster care system, and we offer them a 6-month intern job at the county. And again, we have a lot of, we have the sheriff department, we have the district attorney, we have social services, we have, all kinds of things there. So we hire student workers and do things. Well, we decided to hire some of the very kids that are struggling the most, that have been in our juvenile justice system, that are in this. And then we especially train a job coach to really work with these kids, because these kids aren't really job ready. How are you going to make sure you're there on time, you're dependable? But we added in a generational piece, and we have a life coach. And the life coach is an older adult who says, our goal is to really work with these kids in this 6 months to help make sure as they leave, they're moving on to either school or jobs. It's been a great program. It's been so successful. These kids have done so well, and the outcomes have been measured so great. We have now been doing this for about 8 years. They get a 6-month. The county ends up, and we've hired several of these kids into start positions, help them go to school. But the life coach piece, and again, we do give them a small stipend, and we train them about what we're trying to accomplish with these kids, and they come in, and they have been a vital piece. The job coach can call the life coach and say, not getting to work on time. Or what's the problem? Some of these kids have kids, and we're finding they got a problem. They don't have a good child care. The life coach goes out and sits down and works with everybody to help them get through that. Much of what a parent would do, a caring adult would do, that these kids don't have. So we're being purposeful in bringing it together. Here's our San Pasqual Academy, which is the residential school of foster kids. I can't tell you enough about this. It's just a wonderful program, and if it works there, it works other places. Legacy Corps is a program that we target. We have a lot of veterans. We have one of the largest veteran populations in San Diego County. Well, a lot of veterans, as they age and some of they become homebound, we have their caregiver is with them and often becomes homebound, caring for the veteran. This is a program where we have younger people come in and provide respite so that caregiver gets a break to get out and go. So that program, again, we pay a stipend, gets funded through the Veterans Administration, because they understand the pressures that are on caregivers and what we're doing. And when you, again, you've got that lens on, we're doing a Legacy Corps program to really work with the veteran population. Safe routes to school. We're trying to get kids to get out and walk to school. Well, why don't parents let kids walk? Who in this room walked to school as a kid? Yeah, I did. Well, if you ask that now of age, you know, people, they just don't walk to school. So we're trying to, as part of the 3, 4, 50 and Live Well, get kids to walk to school. Parents don't let them because they're worried it's not safe, pedestrian, or cars going too fast. Is somebody going to snatch them? So we've started this program where older adults in that neighborhood, very neighborhood-based, help kids walk to school. Some of them stand on busy corners and just make sure kids cross, but others actually walk with them part way to get there. And La Mesa is another area where this has been a really successful program. And again, the more people you can get out and using your community, what's good for kids is good for seniors, it's good for families. Lastly, a couple of programs. We have a program where we have homebound seniors, and we do a program, they get home delivered meals where we deliver fresh fruits and vegetables to them as well, trying to help everybody eat healthier. Well, we added an intergenerational piece, and we reached out to some Girl Scout groups and things, and they help us not only pack the fresh fruits and vegetables that go out to seniors, they write them, and we have pen pals that they write notes to the seniors and put in the bag. They do placemats for seniors that go out with these home delivered meals, and we've created an intergenerational program with that to make sure they're not forgotten. We have so many programs. We have a big intergenerational directory of all of our programs. We love to share best practices. We're always looking for best practices. It's online as well as printed, and Donna's got it into some of those programs. And then we also are doing intergenerational training. It has become a core value of our county and our cities, that we are looking at this as a way we need to think in our community, whether we have seniors helping kids, whether we have kids teaching seniors how to use computers, whether we have them visiting isolated and lonely seniors. But it's thriving and doing well, and again, when you look at it, approaching these kind of critical problems, it makes a big difference in their lives. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Donna.
Pam, thanks. That was terrific. What I wanted to talk to you about is just a little bit more about what you can do to try to create harmony, how you can go from silos to solidarity. And I think one of the keys is to make sure that you know that everybody needs to take a bite. Everybody needs to be involved. And one of the areas where we see communities struggle the most has to do with youth engagement and with young people being a part of the decisions. This is a young woman named Carrie Ryan who started connected to us when she was a teenager, starting programs in her high school. She went on to graduate from college, become a Rhodes Scholar, and now she's continuing to pursue her intergenerational work. But it was because she had leadership and ownership when she was young. So it's really important to start an intergenerational committee really early so that you've got people engaged. I remember visiting a program once, and it was a senior center that wanted to start an intergenerational technology program. So they had a senior planning group, and then they invited the high school kids to come over for it. And there was one young person that came. It's that whole thing about if you build it, they won't come. If they build it, they will come. So it's very, very important. And as leaders in your communities, to get the message out that mixing it up is the new cool, and to make sure that the program is tailored to your community. This is an intergenerational surfing competition from the Bay Area. They used to just do older surfing, who was best in their category. And after serving on our program committee, the founder decided to start a new category called intergenerational teams. So there has to be 3 generations, and it's now the most popular surfing contest in that area. So this was last year's winning team with 3 different generations. Now, you probably wouldn't do a surfing competition here in Kansas City, but there's other things that you're known for that really make a lot of sense, that embrace the core values of intergenerational work, which means that it values each generation. You understand it's reciprocal, everybody gives and gets, that it's planned and people are prepared in advance. It's not just throw them in a blender and hit mix, and that they're fun and you get to celebrate. Another thing that's really good in communities is to think about awards, whether it's the best neighborhood, how the neighborhood is getting communities together like they do in Shorewood, Wisconsin, or whether it's your community or national leaders. You saw Chris Van Hollen in the last video. This is an award we gave last week to Senator Chuck Grassley that someone from Iowa came out to give to him. It's also making sure that your policies really value all generations. And as leaders, when you think about the policies in your community, I think about the mayor in a small town in Minnesota, and when she decided it was going to be an intergenerational community, what she did was she formed an advisory council, but then on every application that people filled out to use a community facility, it said how many generations are going to be involved in your activity. How are you reaching out to other generations to engage them? They intentionally made sure that they included intergenerational language. All of their advisory boards, she committed to make sure that they were intergenerational. Communities have also started with the dialogue, pulling people together of different generations to have a vision about what they want their community to look like so that everybody is engaged. It's looking at what you're thinking about as a community with that intergenerational lens. I know transportation is always a huge issue, and what I love is a community in Pennsylvania where they realized that seniors who wanted to volunteer at the schools, if they did just a minor tweak in a policy, could ride the school buses with the students to be able to get to their volunteer work. My favorite was in a city in California where the chief of police was part of the city staff, and they needed to make sure they had transportation. So what they used were the correctional facility vans to transport the seniors to be able to do their work. And the seniors loved it because they're driving around these vans that say, you know, correction center, and they're waving out the windows and just having a great time. But it's using, not letting resources sit idle, thinking about how you create your housing, making sure that we get away from gated communities, because what we talk about is when you have people that are segregated by age. If you've been to some of the facilities, what I always say is there's only 3 topics of conversation. They're the 3 Ps: pain, pills, and passing. What hurts, who died, and what medicines you're on. And then you have teenagers who have the 3 Ts: Twitter, Twilight, and texting. And what we have to do is get the Ps and the Ts together. So let's make sure we mix it up. It can come from the leadership. This is the mayor of Tulsa when he was announcing that they were going to be working towards becoming a community of all ages. It makes sure that you walk the talk and you include young people and older people on any sort of discussion and panel that's about to take place on the topic. Also think about teeing off of national or state events. Grandparents' Day, the first Sunday of every September, is a great time to have your community do something grand. And we have a website that has all kinds of ideas. We also have a lot of social media, and I had to share this one because this was our most popular meme that we got out on Grandparents' Day. And you might recognize the gentleman, but he's saying, I phoned my grandparents and my grandfather said we saw your movie. I said, which one? And he shouted, Betty, what was the name of that movie I didn't like? Grandparents always keep you grounded, whether you're Brad Pitt or... Yeah, Missouri boy. So he knows the value of his grandparents. And it's like Margaret Mead said, somehow we have to get older people back close to growing children if we're to restore a sense of community, a knowledge of the past, and a sense of the future. Margaret Mead would have been 113 years old yesterday, and that message is as important today as it was when she first made it. So be sure that we make sure that we are engaging people of all ages. I'm going to skip through this next video and show it later so that we can get to the interactive part, because you folks have been really, really patient and listening and taking, I think, a lot of information in. I was laughing when I asked Pam to do this. I said, you don't need a PowerPoint. You're just going to, you have to just turn on, and you've got so much enthusiasm about this, and I think we both share that. So we're going to step back for a minute and let you digest a little bit, and I'd love to hear your questions, your comments, and then we have a couple things that we'll close with. And Pam's going to join me for the question part. Okay, so thank you for sitting and listening to this.